You just do.
All right, okay. All right, thank you. Good evening. I acknowledge on behalf of the Board of Trustees that this meeting is being held in the traditional territory of the Licklick people. I am John Kerr, Chairperson of the School District 72 Board of Education. In attendance this evening are Vice Chair Kat Eddy, Trustees Susan Wilson, Joyce McMahon, Shannon Briggs, Richard Franklin, and Daryl Hagan. Also in attendance are Superintendent Dr. Jeremy Morrow, Associate Superintendents Morgan Kyle and Phil Sisnick, as well as Secretary Treasurer Kevin Patrick. Present also are Natalie Crawshaw, Executive Assistant to the Superintendent and Secretary Treasurer, Jennifer Patrick, Manager of Communications, and providing technical support is Clayton Hanson, Manager of Information Technology. Please note that there is a 1 to 3 minute production delay between the live event that you are viewing and meeting participants. The question and answer function is open for questions on agenda items for this meeting. Questions that are posed during the meeting will be addressed at the end of the session. There are several topics that I intend to address this evening, so my remarks will be longer than usual this evening. To begin, I must address erroneous comments by two trustee candidates during last week's trustee forum at the Tidemark Theatre and in social media comments either in video or in written form. First, one candidate displayed a page from the book It's Perfectly Normal, which she called child pornography. She further claimed that the book was readily available to students in school libraries and that after children were dropped off at school, teachers were reading these books to them. All these claims are false. I can only surmise that these comments have been made either in ignorance of the facts or for crass political reasons. To the best of my knowledge, the reality is that there are 4 copies of this book in School District 72 schools, 2 in Campbell River schools, and 2 on Cortez Island. All 4 books in School District 72 schools are available to teachers and parents as a resource to help answer questions which may be brought by a student. They are not in general circulation in the library. They are not read to students, nor are they readily available in those school libraries, as I said. Both books are provincially approved resources, and I stress this, resources, which are, as I noted previously, available to teachers and parents if or when a student brings up a specific question. In my 35 years as a teacher administrator in schools in Prince George and Campbell River, I never once had a student bring a question of this nature to me. To have the presence of this book in 3 schools brought forward as if it was a major problem is disingenuous at best. Second, the charge that the current Board of Education for School District 72 was leaving a structural deficit for the new board to deal with was made by another trustee candidate, both in the trustee forum last week and on social media. The implication is that the current Board of Education has been financially irresponsible and has not dealt with the financial matters affecting this district. It is true that a structural deficit exists in the School District 72 budget, but this is due to several factors. First, the board has chosen to use reserves accumulated over previous years to make up the shortfalls in government funding in order to maintain the services to students that it has determined to be necessary. The board has been directed by the Ministry of Education to spend those reserves. Second, the government has chronically underfunded public education for at least 2 decades. Over the past 2 years, the board has been hit hard by unfunded extraordinary costs associated with the COVID-19 pandemic, including extra cleaning costs, the cost of personal protective equipment, all unfunded after the first year of the pandemic, a major increase in the use of sick days by staff, and the unfunded requirement to provide 5 days sick leave to TTOCs, which are substitutes, annually. In addition, the board faced increased operational expenses of approximately $700,000 because of inflation, which the government does not fund. In effect, the failure to fund inflation is a stealthy but de facto cut in funding that the district faces each year. Over the course of the past 8 years that I've been a trustee, the board has always made the decision to keep budget cuts as far away from the classroom as possible by using accumulated reserves to fund shortfalls rather than resort to staffing reductions, as many other districts who have had less prudent financial management have been forced to do. For every one of those 8 years, the board has submitted a balanced budget, and this year is no different. The structural deficit was addressed by staff reductions away from the classroom, by taking the benefits holiday, that's using money that was surplus to healthcare premiums, reducing school supply budgets because funds allocated for field trips had not been used because of the pandemic, Delaying the replacement of senior management staff who had retired or resigned, and most controversial, the very difficult decision made during the term of the previous board to close the Discovery Passage and Oyster River Elementary Schools, with a resultant ongoing savings of approximately $1 million per year. This board has been financially responsible over the past 8 years that I've been a trustee. The current board, as well as past boards under the guidance of Secretary Treasurer Kevin Patrick, have been very cognizant of its responsibility to measure the taxpayer dollars, to manage the taxpayer dollars with which it is entrusted. It has made difficult decisions to keep any reductions in service away from the classroom, and has always made financial decisions based on the 2019-2023 strategic plan. To suggest that the current Board of Education has, quote, left a structural deficit for the new board, unquote, is simply not true, and is made either from a lack of understanding, I assume, or the board's adherence to the strategic plan, an understanding of the board's adherence to the strategic plan, or as an intentional misstatement of the facts. The board believes strongly in accountability, both within the system and for itself. In the strategic plan, the board has outlined 8 measures of accountability that include measures of graduation rates, measures of literacy and numeracy, with the superintendent reporting to the board annually. Each year, the board has reviewed its performance through an external evaluator. In the reports to the board, the external evaluator, using criteria based on the BCSTA model of board effectiveness, has determined that this is a highly effective board. Over the past term, the board has had several accomplishments to its credit, and I would like to highlight some of them. At the beginning of the term, the board created and implemented a 4-year strategic plan, which has guided the decisions of the board in all areas. It has created and put into practice policies that ensure financial transparency and board oversight. The board has, in collaboration with the late Curtis Wilson, created a new board logo that incorporates a traditional Liquitaa design, which represents the board to the wider community across the province. And I believe you can see it on the screen behind me. As recognition that we live, learn, and work in the traditional unceded territories of the Liquitaa people, the board has supported and funded a successful Kwakwala language program at Rukowak Elementary, with the expectation that it will help keep this language alive into the future. This year, the district applied for and was successful in receiving funding for 7 before and after school daycare facilities, 6 of them run by the district, and 1 to be running by a child care organization on Quarter Island. This is the largest number of daycare facilities for any district in the province. At the beginning of the term, the district saw the installation of a new superintendent and hired 2 associate superintendents who, among other tasks, were charged with improving academic achievement. The results, as you will hear later, indicate that they are making good progress in this area. My greatest regret for the term of this board is that we have been unable to convince the government to fund the greatly needed replacement of Cedar Elementary. Perhaps that will be a priority of the next board. Finally, I would like to address the board itself. Over the past 8 years that I've been a trustee, I found this board to be one that always kept its mandate to improve student achievement foremost in all of its decision making. Thanks to strong communication with senior management, trustees have been well informed on the issues facing them and have done the work necessary to make informed decisions. With the understanding that this is a policy governance corporate board, trustees have always, quote, left their egos at the door, unquote, followed policy in their deliberations, and have supported decisions even if there was disagreement. My experience is that School District 72 trustees are good people, and that makes it a pleasure to work with them. I thank this board for its work on behalf of the students, on behalf of School District 72 students over the past 4 years, and some over the past 8 years, and wish the incoming board every success in the new term. I hope that the next board will be as successful as this one has been. I will miss my work as a trustee, but it's time to move on to other endeavors. Thank you, and best wishes to the new board. Okay. We will move on now to the superintendent's remarks.
Well, thank you very much, Chair Kerr, and I will just make sure to notify now that we are over at Tech Glitch. There was both the former chairs, Susan Wilson, and former chairs, Richard Franklin, that did have some comments. So we'll make sure those are diarized and captured, if not verbatim, at least the essence of what was shared. So we'll make sure that that goes out. So apologize for that. I'll start with some good news that we are slightly over our spring projections. We're up approximately 80 students from last year. This means, and the reason why I say approximately is because although final verification of the 1701 report goes to the ministry, this is where any students that are duplicately enrolled need to be clarified. So just before we give you precise final numbers, we're right at about the 5,600 student mark. And I'll just share within that approximately 22% of those students are of Indigenous identification. We have 5% of our students identified as ELL or ESD. That's English language learners or English as a second dialect. And 13.5% of our student population are designated as unique needs students. I wanted to share just a short vignette. Just had the pleasure of visiting the school on Friday, talking with teachers, talking with administration and office staff. And it was getting close to the end of the day, and a student with diverse needs was quite elevated. And it was a moment where just being there, I didn't have anything to do with the solution of the moment, but just to watch how empathetically and compassionately staff were able to professionally de-escalate a complex circumstance. And actually, when I actually left the school, I left the school with the principal sitting outside on the curb with this young person, just in such a calm, beautifully compassionate way. And it was just a regular, normal, professional response to a unique circumstance. And I think that while we often can share the big moments and we share the highlights, and tonight we will share some student learning data, there are those special moments that just take place every day in our schools that are really remarkable and inspiring when you have the opportunity to observe them. So I just wanted to share that again. It was just special to see it. I mentioned already there are some data. Without spoiler alerts, there are some areas that we're showing improvement and on the right trajectory, and there will be areas for continued focus and growth. And I'll share more of that in just a few moments. I just had that opportunity to share that little vignette. It's appropriate as we look at both last week was National Teachers Day. I believe they've declared this National Principals Month and Vice Principals Month. So we're celebrating our educators, and there is a recognition that the role for our educators increases in complexity year by year, and an opportunity to express our gratitude for our staff to continue to rise to those challenges. A little lesser known is the week of October 17th is National Bus Drivers Week. And I do want to take a moment, although there are a lot of dates, so it's possible we might miss something, but I do think that this is a unique opportunity to acknowledge a group of people who are the first and last impression of our district every single day for approximately 1,500 students, more when there's field trips, and that they are so deeply connected. I've had the opportunity to meet with our transportation department multiple times, and the passion they have around making sure that every student arrives safely. In fact, it is the safest way that students can get to school. It's the safest mode of transportation and historic in our district, and so grateful for that. So, but there's this passion around safety, but safety, there is also recognition in our transportation department that safety includes the way that kids experience that bus ride, and the commitment to that positive greeting and that have a good night, goodbye. And I'm just grateful for those humble acts that are happening with our transportation department in the service of our students that every day add up to a message of welcome and support and appreciation. So I just wanted to take one moment to thank our wonderful transportation department. And then lastly, I'll just add my voice to the sentiments that were shared tonight. I do think as this board is outgoing, and as you reflect on the accomplishments and challenges of the past 4 years, I just wanted to share personally, as someone privileged with a front seat to the functioning of this board over the last 4 years, I wanted to thank each of you for your service, dedication, commitment, and advocacy on behalf of students and their families. And then I would add my gratitude to the fact that we have both incumbent and new community members willing to step and let their names stand for a role that truly is in the public service of our children. And so I thank you to our outgoing trustees and to our incoming board to be willing to go through a municipal election in the service of children. There's a lot of courage and vulnerability, and I'm grateful that there's people willing to do so. So thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Morrow. There's no superintendent's pay, is there? Thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of the meeting of September 27, 2022, and the suggested motion is that the minutes of the meeting of September 27, 2022 are hereby approved as circulated. Trustee Hagan, Trustee Eddy. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Okay, the motion is passed. Next item, is there any business arising from the minutes? Seeing none, we will move into additions or alterations to the agenda. Trustee Eddy.
I'd like to add a topic under 16, please, 16A, any other business. I'd like to discuss student voice and the civic literacy that's being done in our schools right now. It's pretty impressive.
Thank you. So, can the motions? Are there any other additions to the agenda? Okay, we move to approval of the agenda, and the suggested motions of the agenda is hereby approved as amended. Trustee Franklin, Trustee Wilson. Any discussion? All those in favor? Okay, the motion is passed. We will move to report of board decisions from the October 11, 2022 confidential board meeting. Vice Chair Eddy, this is your last report to this board.
It will be, it all seems so final. So this evening in the confidential meeting, we discussed matters of personnel, and that's about it, really. We did complete our agenda and we won't be going back tonight. So thank you for your service, everybody.
Okay. We don't have anything for correspondence or public submissions, agenda submissions. We do have an item on educational submissions, and that's a Campbell River situation table update, and that's Ms. Ewing. Oh, there you are. Okay, thank you.
Good evening, trustees. So I'm here just to give a bit of an update because this board committed to have a person sitting at the table, at the situation table, and that's myself. I sit at the weekly meetings, and then Morgan Kyle sits at the quarterly meetings, I believe, with the situation table. So the situation table is led and supported by the Ministry of Public Safety and the Solicitor General. And basically it is stakeholders from our community that are connected to all facets of our community. And it's looking at all ages people that might be in crisis across our community. So sitting at the table is just some of the organizations that sit there would be the school district, Foundry, John Howard, the Ann Elmore Transition House, Sassamans, RCMP, many more. I'm just naming a few. It's a large group of people, and the idea is we meet weekly, and situations are brought forward if an individual in the community, like I said, any age, is seen to be in a crisis, and then it goes through, it's a confidential meeting, so there's sort of 4 pillars of confidence that you go through. And then if it's seen that it needs to progress to the next level based on information that's shared in a confidential manner, then organizations, if they're connected to the individual, and then they look at ways they can support. So the whole idea is a wraparound approach, and it's committed to acting on it within 24 hours if it's seen as an elevated crisis for that individual. And the team quickly meets on that day and then makes a plan. And it's called the door knock, so it's a little bit different. So it might be that lots of resources have been utilized or lots of people are connected, but it's sort of like they're saying, let's get together and do one last door knock to see how we might be able to support this individual. So the team goes where it might be a person's house, where they reside, wherever that might be, and offers supports. And then basically from there, move forward if individuals offer support. We have brought forward students from the district, and we have found that in all those situations, it has been very successful, that the supports from community have been timely and efficient and wrap around, and it happens right away. And for those youth that we brought forward, because we felt that even with all the resources we have at our fingertips, they still were at an elevated risk, either for themselves, others, the community. And yeah, it's been very effective, we found. I just have to say, as far as sitting on there as a community too, it's been effective for our community. Actually, it's brought back basically the next week, just a quick update on whether someone accepted the supports and whether they're out of that crisis zone. And it has been effective in community. So thank you for allowing me to sit at the table. And I think it's just one more way that we see seems to be more opportunities in community to connect, provide services for youth, other community members. And I think all those connections we make are just supporting the children that are in our school district and the connections we make. So yeah, it started last spring and has been very effective. So I don't know. And one of the ideas, yes, is the idea is to also increase community connections as well as reduce long-term demand on emergency services. We're hoping to be a little bit proactive, even though the person's in crisis, really before there is, you know, it goes any further from that point. Don't know if anybody has any questions about that.
Are there any questions? Trustee Hagan?
I was wondering if mental health was involved as well.
So it would be like family services sits on it, child and youth mental health. So John Howard Society, yes. So different Sassamans, like so, all of those organizations are connected to mental health supports in a variety of ways. So yeah, many connected to mental health, addiction, victim services. Trying to think of all the people. Like if there's many people that sit at the table and.
You follow up.
Yeah, I'm really impressed because this is something we were worried that we had children coming back from crises and we weren't informed or we didn't know and they were falling through the cracks. And I think this is a wonderful way to apply all of our resources and that it's not just the school district's responsibility, but there are many more resources out there that would help apply, but hopefully that we don't let anyone, you know, get to the point where we lose somebody. And I'm really pleased with that. So thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Hagan. Trustee McMahon, you had a question?
Yeah, I'm excited by this opportunity to capitalize on community resources rather than siloing everybody. But I'm wondering, are there established criteria by which you know, are able to judge whether somebody should be brought to the table or not?
Yes, there is a criteria with which you look at whether the individual should be brought forward to the table. And then within that, like you do non-identified, you go through kind of a non-identified, but you explain the situation with non-identified criteria, you know. And then based on that, there's a criteria within that which the table decides whether it should move forward to the next stage. So there's like, I think it's a 4-phase approach that assesses whether or not, and there's certain criteria that meet whether it's that elevated risk, like difference.
So at that first stage of assessment, are there, you know, strategies for how to, you know, off ramp them to supports, or are they just kind of left to whatever devices the person who brought forward or the agency that brought them forward can manage for them?
Like if they didn't make it through to
Yeah,
the next piece. To be honest, there hasn't actually been one that hasn't made it forward. I think because of the pretty explicit criteria, and anyone that I sat on, that any person that has been brought to the table has move forward to the next stage. So maybe it's because it's very clear what those elevated risk factors, it's, there's many of them that go obviously from addiction, poverty, homelessness, self-harm, the list goes on. So they have to show, you know, a certain number of those, and that there could be, like we said, like, is there an imminent risk to this individual or others in the community based on those risk factors?
Okay, thank you.
Trustee Wilson.
I'd just like to say it's very nice to have a ray of hope,
Mhm.
because so often we feel overwhelmed or feel like there are too many cracks that people fall through. So this sounds like a very productive grouping, and I'm really happy to hear it's going well. Thank you.
Yeah,
This one.
it is, and I think just for our district, but also sitting there, like I said, like for our community. I mean, obviously, we've been hearing news about some of the issues that are happening in the community. And I think it shows that there's lots of people supporting people that are in crisis across our community and wanting to help and coming together to support. So
I just had one more follow-up. So we have a quarterly meeting. So what happens if there's somebody in crises that we know that's back in the school district? Is there some kind of a contact back to the district, or how does that work?
oh, sorry. So Morgan sits on the quarterly meeting where they kind of look at
Like,
bigger picture
Yeah.
system. And then it's a weekly meeting that I sit at. So every Wednesday morning.
okay,
So we meet weekly, and yeah, and then the next week you go back to the situation and say whether or not supports were offered, whether they were accepted, and it's been kind of taken off the table or not. There's also, yeah, there's some, it goes to, there's obviously looking at community patterns, but then looking at provincial patterns too, because I think right now there's 20 situation tables across the province. So the other idea is to look at patterns within our community. We do have a couple tags, like we'll say, obviously it's not all the factors, but might be whether the individual is Indigenous, but whether their youth, their age is in there. So there's not identified, but you can look at some of the bigger picture pieces, I guess, to look at the patterns.
Is anybody else on the list here? No, I didn't see any other hands, so I'm going to ask my question. You provided a list of some of the groups that are involved
Mhm.
in the situation table, but one of the things, one of the groups that I didn't hear is Ministry of Children and Families. Are they involved in that as well?
Yes, sorry. Yep, they are. Yeah.
Okay,
There's probably, yeah, VHA, could have written them all, but there's.
that's okay.
And continuing to try to, like, we just had a new to our community too, it's called Y-Star, just because we get an acronym, I'll forget what it stands for, but it's basically another youth response team. This is actually another response team in our community. And that's also dealing with youth in crisis, whether it's through substance use or risk of self-harm. And that's another team that sits at the table that is another team that right now has been like supporting our district. They just started in September and already they're connected to many of our youth. And again, it's when, you know, like in the community, it's hard to find supports. We are finding supports for those students that need it, like right now, which is good. So, and they also are now at the table. So they're trying to get as many people as connected. So because it started in the spring, I think there's still, they hear of an organization that should be connected, or they're trying to reach out and get them at the table too.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. It's good to know that there's some good progress being made.
Okay, and maybe just since it is the last meeting of this group, I just thought on behalf of Learning Support Services, who I represent, I do want to thank you for your service, in particular for our diverse and vulnerable learners. I definitely felt in my last year that you are supportive and advocates for our learners, for all learners. And I also just want to commend you because in that strategic plan, not only did you look at student achievement, but you were looking at that mental health and wellness. Who would have known how critical that was coming into 2020 when you did that? But that was so forward thinking, and I think it allowed us to have that foundational base as we moved into that pandemic, and obviously then mental health of people across the system increased. And I think we were well set up for already building that capacity amongst our staff, and that's just grown. So thank you so much for that support, and you made a difference in the lives of kids in your time. here, and I'm sure some of you will be back, but I do really appreciate the support that you've given.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Next item on the agenda, we will go to our superintendent for his reporting a framework for enhanced student learning.
Yeah, thanks. So tonight I will walk us through some student data. Some data that is expected from the ministry to be made public, as well as additional data points that will hold staff accountable to the board's strategic goal of improving student achievement. So I will be sharing some data tonight. I do want to start though by, I don't know what the parallel would be in a private practice where you might look at some of the graphs and see a slight improvement in profit. The difference is that our student data represents individual students. And while we will look at some growth areas or areas that we've grown in, I do recognize that until our grad rate is 100%, until there is no disparity between Indigenous and non-Indigenous student outcomes, that we will continue to be relentless in the pursuit of each and every child. And so I just recognize the difference between student data and like a profit chart. We might be moving into more profitability, but recognizing that every outcome that's missed is an impact on the individual student. So I'll start with that. This, just to share, I will be respectful of and try to keep it as engaging as possible of everyone's time. Every single item that's in this framework for enhanced student learning is part of a public report that will be posted and available for anyone to review at any time on our district's website. And we'll make sure that that link is easy to track and to follow. If it's okay, I'll sit for this presentation because I can operate this as well. So our document, the Enhanced Student Framework Learning document, is a 16-page document. And it highlights just some of the demographic information, but particularly it highlights specific ways in which staff and have engaged in the direction of the board's strategic plan. So the number one role of the board and the number one goal of the strategic plan was around improving student achievement. And I think if I could go back in time, knowing now and having worked closely with the strategic plan for the last 4 years, I think my suggestion would be that priority 2 and 3, one, we wouldn't number them, but 2, that building a culture of learning and wellness and honoring Indigenous worldviews and perspectives are actually the ways in which we improve student achievement. So it's really the tools and the culture and the environment in which student achievement can thrive and grow. So I would, and I think and that's a significant task for the new board of trustees, is the consultation process and development of the next strategic plan. But certainly priority 1 is the outcome, but the intention of priority 2 and 3 is to support that student achievement piece. So there's a number of things I think particularly that I'll highlight that are highlighted in the report. But tonight I think I would like to particularly highlight that last year was the first year that we had a comprehensive implementation of a new literacy framework, which had every student K-5 screened. Now, I'll show you some data on that tonight. The intention and what's happening this year is there's a fall, an early spring or a February, and then a spring assessment. We'll be able to see some growth and see whether the interventions around literacy are moving students forward in that framework. Again, it's highlighted even just a few moments ago, some of the work that has been engaged in around the goal and priority of developing a culture of learning and wellness. And we do, one of the goals was actually just the development of a framework, which is now being implemented as well across the district. So there is, and certainly both priority 1 and 2 are interwoven with implementing and integrating Indigenous worldview and perspective. So there's a number of specific pieces that can be reviewed in the document. And particularly as we connect priority 3 to priority 1, one of the goals of the board was to see equity across all measures between Indigenous and non-Indigenous students, and that will need to continue to be an area of focus. That is work that we continue to see gaps in all of our assessments between Indigenous and non-Indigenous students. And the fundamental belief that we do believe all of our students are gifted equally across our district, but our outcomes that we're seeing are not. And so we continue to do that work of supporting and ensuring that all groups in our district are represented in the outcomes that we're seeking. So this was our district kind of demographic last year. You can see that we had 5,520 students overall, 1,305 students designated Indigenous, and 757 students who have a designation through student services. And I would just note that that designations there's more need than designation, and that there's often a significant diversity even within students who don't necessarily have a learning designation. There's some interesting community and socioeconomic, and then just included in this report is a little bit of information that comes to us through the EDI report, and particularly to know that we're one of the farthest right districts in terms of students when they come into our schools in terms of their language and cognitive development. So that is an area that we see right away, and certainly is reflective of some of the outcomes and some of the intervention that we have focused around literacy. So how are we doing? Well, we're going to answer that in a couple of different ways, and we'll try and triangulate the data. So the first data point that we're going to share tonight is in the foundation skills assessment with literacy. What you will see throughout the presentation is this red bar, which is absent on this first graph. This red bar shows a range of districts at the range of our school district's result over the past 5 years. The reason why there isn't a range is because the foundation skills assessment underwent a significant revision, and so it's not comparative to previous year's results. But what you can see is the gray bar represents where the average 50% of districts. So this is where the district average range is. So in an ideal, if we were looking at ideal student outcomes, our red dot be way over here in the exceeding the average of the district. And you can see even in that single snapshot that when you compare us to other districts in the province, you can see that our tendency is on the left side or the lower side of the average within those school districts. So, and again, I know there's lots of conversation around FSC, but if it's taken as a data point to triangulate, it does triangulate with our DIBELS assessments as well as some of our classroom assessments from our teachers. So I, again, literacy has been the focus of this board, and it continues to be an area that I would suggest is an area that we need to continue to focus on. The graduation assessment data is a range of school districts results, recent results. They're still very new, and we don't have 5 years worth of results on this. Where you see at the bottom, where it says special needs. So you're seeing 3 data sets in each of our data pieces, which would be all students, Indigenous students, and students who have been identified special needs. And there are some data points where it gets small enough that it's got masked. It's masked. We don't actually know where on that piece we are because there wasn't enough students. But you can see that we are close to the provincial average, but on the low side last year of that. Now, one of the pieces with this is one of the difficulties in year-by-year comparisons is students actually have multiple times to write it. They can write it in different years, and so that is there's potentially going to be some year-by-year variations, but we're seeing a consistent literacy result on the lower side in those provincial assessments. So I am including these report card marks. I don't expect everyone to be able to track all of that right now, but where I'd say our relentless pursuit continues to need to be is in these lower areas and moving students from left to right. And so you can see like in an ideal circumstance, so we have in terms of reading and writing and literacy expectations, this is reading. So in kindergarten, different, we'll leave kindergarten there, but you can see grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, grade 4, and grade 5. And this is what we'd want to see as well in our Dibble screener is less and less students in the emerging category the longer that they're with us. And the more they move into proficient or extending. And so you can see this is, and it's included because we've recently moved into MyEd. And I believe that the board will have access now to a wide range of these data sets and reporting tools where you can make year by year comparisons and cohort groups. So very easily at this time next year, if we put these report card marks up, you'll be able to see the kindergarten, let's say grade 1 at 26.91. How are they in grade 2 the next year? And so you'll be able to see that progression of student achievement as they go through. And you can see it's interesting, the writing, which we've actually had anecdotally, that's been one of our stronger sort of literacy markers rather than just the reading and the comprehension of reading. I wanted to share this piece. This is an important new bit of data for the district in consideration of how students are moving forward with literacy. We do have 3 different times in the year where students are screened with the Dibble screener. The reason why we've only included the composite report is in the implementation last year. So for example, at kindergarten, I believe there's 150 more students that wrote the final screener than the beginning screeners. It's very difficult to track the progress last year. This is included to ensure that there's public accountability because we will be able to see next year, let's say we have close to 200 students who are in the red requiring intensive intervention to meet expectations at that grade or at that age. For literacy, how many are there in grade 3? So if you look at the way that this looks right now, where it goes down for the first 3 years, if we're getting it right the way we'd like to see that red line going down, and by the end of grade 5, essentially having no students left that require that intensive. So they're meeting grade level expectations. And we know literally by the end of grade 3 that that's really our target, but it gives us an ability to track for those 5 years. So so next year we'll be able to look at with our final composite mark, this grade K, where are they at in the spring in grade 1, and are we moving them forward? So not only will we be able to track growth through the year, but we'll be able to track growth from one year to the next and ensure that those students are being supported. In this, there is an encouraging trend, which we were seeing in previous district data results, really the absence of kind of that extending group, and we are seeing a bit of a rebound there. So this is going to be another tool. It is a component of understanding where we're at with literacy. And I just recognize that both the FSA and the screener, our primary reporting on where students are at with literacy remains the report card of the classroom teacher, but this allows for some triangulation. And what it also allows for is a more focused understanding what schools really require additional supports and how will we go about that support. So it's an opportunity for us to ensure that our supports are aligned with need. And so that will enhance our ability to do so. I thought these were really fascinating results here. You can see slightly different than the literacy piece where not only are we at the far right of a 5-year achievement range, but at the top end in grade 7 particularly of the provincial average. So so there's some encouraging numeracy results there. And again, what we want to see is this, well, first of all, we want to see this bar get shorter and we want to see it moving to the right, and this dot. When we're getting outcomes that we're seeking, we would be seeing this dot on the far right. It's moving forward year by year. And you can see again, some masked results, but kind of in the middle with our numeracy 10 assessment. You can see based on this chart, although it's a little bit confusing potentially, is this tracks grade to grade transitions, and you can see the tight grouping in an upward fashion last year. So students are transitioning grade to grade, and you can use this flow chart to kind of track that. It's a little tricky to understand, but if you look at this cohort of 364 students, grade to grade transitions, if you just follow the blue, which is the good news track, it's 340 plus 3 plus 3. So 346 of 364 students transition grade by grade by grade. There's 17% that either have moved, but have moved outside of our ability to track their paths. We don't know if they successfully completed grade to grade transition. And then these are areas where you can see 4 students were unsuccessful in that transition. So it just gives an example of our grade to grade transitions are very close. There's a positive trend, and our grade to grade transitions are quite high. And I think this is, again, there is a difference between a growth mindset and a deficit mindset. So when you look at this, there's some tremendous growth. And I think this is a place where there can be a pause, which is around a discernible improvement in completion rates, particularly last year in our Indigenous students. Now we want to see, of course, 100%. We certainly want to be outside of the gray area, but we definitely want to be continuing to stay at the far right of that achievement graph. And you can see a discernible improvement in grad rates over the past 5 years. Last year, you can see compared to the previous 5 years. And of particular note is a change. The previous year, the distance between Indigenous and non-Indigenous student grad rates was significantly higher than last year at 17% spread. So there's a change and a positive improvement there. And if I could be so bold, I will jump in front of what I anticipate to be a question from Chair Kerr. That if we were to disaggregate that data further, which the ministry doesn't do for us in terms of we have here, BC residents, Indigenous, special needs, all students, and actually go male and female. The difference between male and female grad rates in our district is 6%, and the 6% is the difference. Males are 6% lower than females in our overall graduation rate. There's a 4% difference in the same direction provincially. But that question further gives us, and this is what I appreciate about data, is when we start asking questions about it leads to even more uncovering. And when you look at, so our Indigenous grad rate last year was 68.9%. Our Indigenous grad rate for female students was 79.6%, and our Indigenous grad rate for males was 59.6%. So we are significantly above provincial average for female Indigenous students and significantly lower for male Indigenous students. So when we look at, well, how do we improve our grad rate? Well, we improve the experience for Indigenous male students in our system. That's a real area of where when we ask questions about the data, it uncovers an area where there's a significant discrepancy in data points. So, again, I know the commitment and the advocacy and the expectations from this board and the accountability about seeing improvement in Indigenous student outcomes. I'm happy to report that we're moving in the right direction, and sad to report, but need to that we have so much more work that continues to need to be done. So that, again, when you add just another graph, you can see that we're heading in the right direction in terms of upward, and that those represent grad rate to the scale on the left. And the distance between the red circle and the blue circle is the disparity between Indigenous and non-Indigenous outcomes. So when we have gone further and progressed where the intention of this board is, and our staff as well, this blue circle will be superimposed. It'll be a purple circle. It'll be we won't be able to see that difference, but again, this is a tighter grouping, higher than we've had in the previous number of years. So, so that's some good news there. This is an interesting piece, and we'll have some further work to do here. Again, we have a five-year grad or 5-year historical result, which is this lovely red line. And then our dot is where we were at last year. And you can see that when the question is asked of our students, do you feel welcome at school? Our elementary students report the highest that they have in the last 5 years and above provincial average. And in the same year, that question is asked of secondary, do you feel welcome at school? And it's the lowest in the 5-year graph, still within provincial average, but you can see a real disparity between the experience between our elementary and secondary students, and we can guess what some of those might be. But I would suggest too that some of the opportunities and culture building pieces that take place at secondary were absent, at least for a significant component of the last 2 years. So, so there's some more data. We've got some information, further information around students report whether they like school all of the time or many of the times. There is not as many, it's not as high a percent of people reporting. So as you can see, that mixed data from the last number of years. So and again, how many adults at your school care about you? And again, we want to see that heading in a different trajectory. We are having students, particularly in grade 7, reporting less. However, the other number is just less number of students participating in that survey. So, but it's important that we are investigating those trends and what they may mean, and certainly want to see every single student clearly indicating that they know there's 2 or more adults at each school that does care about them. And I think it's important too, because, you know, for student results, you know, sometimes as educators, we like to say, but they know and care, they know, and this shows that our narrative about every kid feeling that they are having a wonderful experience and they're happy every day isn't necessarily there. So there's work to do around how kids are experiencing each day, and also around ensuring that student outcomes continue to go in the right direction. So that is kind of the end of that piece. This data graph, again, just less numbers of students, so not as comprehensive as some of those other data points. But we'll post this up on the website and certainly to questions if trustees have it.
Yeah, got one. More other people do like that one here. If you look at the last graph you showed us,
Graph, this one?
I know the last chart, I should say. Yeah, that one. How many adults at your school care about? I noticed there's a tremendous discrepancy between the numbers from 2018, 19, and 2 years following that in both grade 4s and 7s. I'm just wondering if that has anything to do with pandemic, or, you know, like the numbers seem to be far less than they were before. Well, especially in the grade 4s, but in some of the grade 7s as well.
I think one of the challenges we have is on that student learning survey data, the number of students is, yeah, it could be, that is possible. We don't know what all of those pieces are, but the huge disparity between 2015 and 2016 at 91% and the next year at 67%. I don't know if that's just year to year volatility or what the reasons would be for a 25% point drop between one year and the next.
Trustee Eddie?
I love the fact that we're looking at this data, because as a current trustee and potentially a future trustee, knowing that we're losing a lot of our Indigenous male learners around the grade 10 year helps us to focus resources and helps us to consult with our communities about how we can keep their kids engaged through the grade 12 process. And having the triangulation of data and being able to really see where we can improve as an education system in service of the kids, I think will make all the difference. We may not have all the answers, but at least we can see where we're going to target some of our resources. So thank you for the comprehensive data, because I don't think that we've always had that as a group. And being able to really speak to trends with not just our educators, but with the communities that surround those kids, so that we can look at it as a holistic approach and wrap around, as Brenda was saying, a wraparound approach to keeping those guys engaged in school.
And I'll just thank you, Ken, I'll just say that the intention of this, the whole document is to be understandable, accessible, and to be accountable. So I'll just say as well that further questions that trustees have around specific data sets, we've also seen a tremendous move forward with the ministry in terms of accessibility of some district level data that was not available before. So there are enhanced ways now, really. And what we find is as we start to ask questions, it leads to other questions and other questions. And as you say, that can really focus. And I believe as we look at one of the pieces for the board to consider in the development of its next strategic plan is those data pieces and how will it guide what goals the board has, because there are learning areas in our district that we are concerned about and need to be focused on. And I think this board's focus on literacy will likely be, the data continues to support that as an area of concern. And I have no doubt that as the board's targets increased graduation rates, the way we do that is ensuring that there's early intervention and that there's meaningful supports, K to 3, 4, and 5. So I believe that will continue to need to be an area of focus.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you for that comprehensive report. Certainly lets the board know that there's progress made, but there's a long way to go. Okay. We do not have any matters of elected or board matters and educational issues on the agenda, so we'll move to business administration. And the first item is the finance warrant number 1 for July 31, 2022. The suggested motion is that the finance warrant number 1 dated July 31, 2022 be accepted as presented. Taken, second Eddie. Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor? Okay, the motion is passed. The next item then is finance warrant number 2 for the 2nd of August. Pardon me, number 2, August 30, 2022. And the suggested motion is that the finance warrant number 2 dated August 31, 2022 be accepted as presented. Okay, Trustee McMahon, did you have your hand up? And Trustee Eddie? Or Hagan, either one.
Yeah.
All right, Trustee Eddie. You want to arm wrestle for it? Okay, Trustee Eddie. Okay, are there any questions about this finance warrant? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? You're opposed? You're opposed, or are you late in favor?
Favor.
Okay, the motion is passed. Okay, and the third finance warrant number 3, September 30, 2022. And the suggested motion is that the finance warrant number 3 dated September 30, 2022 be accepted as presented. Trustee Briggs and Trustee Hagan. Okay, any discussion? Yeah.
I just wanted to make note of the fact that I don't remember ever having a finance warrant come out so soon. This is amazing. Somebody's really working hard here.
Absolutely.
Yeah, September 30th finance warrant on the 11th of October.
Absolutely. After a hard summer, finishing the financial statements, they're back to regular operations and continuing the hard work to get caught up.
Well, please mention, I noticed.
Yes.
Are there any other questions or comments on
Yeah.
finance warrant number 3? Okay, all those in favor of the motion? Okay, the motion is passed. Okay, then we'll move on to item number 15, committee reports, and from trustee Briggs, report on the October 6th student leadership committee meeting.
We met last Thursday. We had a smaller group than usual. Unfortunately, Jeremy couldn't be there, but the principal of Indigenous Education, Deb Martell, facilitated, and Joyce was there as well as myself. We had Timberline, Carrie High, and Southgate represented, I believe. We discussed school startup for the students and what could be improved. And again, they never fail to disappoint with what we can do better. Very good feedback. They gave student experiences of the Truth and Reconciliation Day events at their schools. And we discussed the one-time Student and Family Affordability Fund to help with food security and accessibility. And again, I had lots of ideas for that. I look forward to growing our group a little bit bigger this year. Oh, Kevin was there as well. Sorry, Kevin. Yeah.
Thank you.
You have anything to add?
Okay.
No, I love them. I
Sorry,
love this.
were there any questions for trustee Briggs?
Well, I
Yes.
have one. Do you go in with an agenda of things you want to talk about, or do they submit things ahead? How do you develop the topics that you discuss?
Jeremy has a lovely, really long list of questions that we never get to all of them because they give us so much feedback on a few. It's really student guided for the most part.
Okay.
Pretty organic, so it not, it can start off on a topic and then you get lots of other information.
You digress.
Yes,
All right.
perfectly, I would say.
Okay, so thank you. All right, any other business, trustee Eddie, you had an item on student voice.
So I wanted to share a terrifying experience that I had last week. I was invited to Pinecrest as a sitting trustee to sit in the library with 3 grade 4 to 5 classrooms as they peppered me with questions and comments about what they'd like to see for their schools. So there's been a really great push amongst our educators. There's a website called Civics, which is gathering student voice. So they're actually doing mock municipal elections, and there are a lot of educators that are super engaged in the municipal election, inviting candidates in to answer questions on behalf of the kids. I'll be at Phoenix tomorrow as a trustee to be asked questions by some grade 8 students. Something that I found interesting, we were at Pinecrest, so Pinecrest is kind of my son's alma mater, and it's my neighborhood. And it started with, what would you like to fix? So we have a gate out front of Pinecrest that apparently if you kick the ball out there, you catch it at the hospital, because once it gets on the road, it just goes bouncing down the road all the way to the hospital. And how do we get that fixed? But something that I noticed, and something that's a little concerning to me, and I want to put forth to the next board of trustees as we think about our facilities plans, is kids. It started with one kid talking about a bottle of alcohol he had found in the forest. And then the hands went up. And I had a whole room full of grade 4 and 5 sharing these really real experiences they're having in their community, in their school grounds, around maybe people that aren't being as respectful of their spaces as they should be. It was easy to swing the conversation by asking them what positive things happened. And for sure it was their teachers. Their teachers are the most positive lights in their school days. But I asked us to keep that in mind and perhaps think a little bit more deeply about how we protect our school grounds from things that shouldn't be there, things that our kids shouldn't be thinking about at 8, 9, 10 years old. I know it's a reality in our community, in our lives right now, but to hear so many kids relate stories kind of concerned me. So on a positive note to all the teachers that are pushing the municipal elections, that are really getting their kids engaged, are asking hard questions, candidates, like really hard questions. The way that only a child can, with that beautiful big-eyed innocence. And thank you to our educators, and it's been a blast, guys. Thanks for a great 4 years.
And the final item on the agenda are there questions from anyone present on the agenda items for this meeting? Trustee candidate Harper.
Process question first for you, Chair. So would you agree that the chairperson's remarks form part of the agenda item?
Yeah, it's part of the chairperson's remarks, and you will have the opportunity to ask a question on it.
Yeah, okay, so then you did not deny the district that the structural deficit. If you find someone in this room who could tell me.
I'm sorry, can you speak a little?
You did not deny that the district has a structural deficit. Could you find someone in this room who could tell me and the general public watching online? And maybe as of June 30th, 2022, or whatever date would be appropriate, plus or minus $100,000 even, what the structural deficit is, just out of interest.
I think I indicated it was about $700,000, but I'm going to refer this question to Secretary Treasurer Patrick.
So the structural deficit is actually for the 22-23 year. The year that we ended, June 30th, had a deficit of about $3 million. So, but the board last spring went through a process to balance the budget, and the budget was balanced with a zero deficit. So every year we typically run a deficit borrowing off of reserves. But for the 22-23 year, it was balanced to a zero deficit. And that was done by borrowing, or not borrowing, but by utilizing surplus funds from a benefit program that we have. And by utilizing $150,000 from the international program that was available. So you could argue that the $150,000 from the international program is not a structural deficit. It could be available for the future years, but the benefit holiday likely won't be. So I would count that to be a future structural deficit that may need to be found through reductions. But that fund is there, it's available. It is something that can cover the deficit without a reduction to classrooms. So that's why that was put forward. And then the other $250,000 is an expected increase for exempt and management wages that in all likelihood will not be funded. Of course, we did not know what that was when we balanced the budget. So at the time, really the structural deficit when the budget was passed was about a $500,000 structural deficit. So, but in when this provincial framework agreement was settled, we have found that it will be about a $250,000 impact. So right now the expectation is $750,000 for structural deficit that will extend. Again, the 22-23 year is balanced, so the structural deficit would look to be addressed in the 23-24 year. But at that time, you'll have to weigh that based on the future costs, further inflation, as well as revenue changes, again, growth or decline of enrollment with our students, any adjustments to other educational and financial grants from the Ministry of Education.
Thank you. Are there further questions from? Well, I'll allow you one follow-up because you
I just want to be clear that the answer was $750,000.
That's the figure that Secretary Treasurer Patrick has provided. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else on the line?
So there are two other questions, or a question and comment that have come in online from Andrea Craddock, Keepy Local 723 president. So the first, the question is there a process for SD 72 staff to put forward a student's name they think should be considered for the situation table? Do they contact Brennan Ewing directly or question mark?
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to give that to Morgan, but.
Go ahead.
That would be correct, to contact Brianna.
Okay, wonderful. And then the last is that Andrea submitted a comment that she asked to be shared with the board. She said that she had hoped to attend tonight's meeting to personally, and on behalf of support staff, thank the retiring board members, but was unable to attend. Please thank them for the many positive impacts their service has had for students, staff, and the greater community. All the very best with your future endeavors. From Andrew Craddock on behalf of QP Local 720.
Okay. Trustee Hagan.
I don't have a question.
No, you don't
The
have a
question is, I'd like to move adjournment, but while I'm still talking, to say thank you. You've been a great board. I've seen a lot of boards, and this is a high functioning board. I've appreciated all your work and effort, and you know, by now we should all have really fat butts, but it hasn't really happened. I think it keeps us slim just going to so many meetings and trying to do what's best for kids, and the focus that you've had and the integration between our top educators. And even today, when I walked in, and it was so delightful to see them just talking about how can we do this best with the money that we have, how can we get this solution done? And it's a work ethic that has come right through everyone that's sitting around this table. I'd like to say my sincere thanks and move adjournment.
Okay, and thank you to this board. My appreciation for all of your work and just diligence over the past 8 for some of you and 4 for some of you as well. Good luck to those who are running. Yeah. Be interesting to see the results on Saturday night.
Best wishes.